What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Fish the Moment. Today I would like to bring to you a new video series that we're going to bring to the channel, and it's going to be the underwater bait testing series. Johnny before has done some underwater bait testing videos before, but now we're going to go ahead and grow on the underwater bait testing. We're going to do this by giving y'all a pool shot of baits we're going to test and then the lake shots. Today, let's start this series off with the big worm. I have 5 different types of worms from different bait companies and colors that I like to test and share with y'all today. I've always thrown the Zumo Monster. I know lately I've tried a couple different brands, but maybe after this footage, I'll go ahead and try some different brands out and just to go ahead and broaden my horizon of worms. Maybe y'all will too. Let's go check it out. So here is our Zumo Monster. We're going to be doing this test in the red bug color. Now after seeing this worm underwater, I can see why it is a favorite to a lot of people that like to throw the big worms. One thing that got me about watching the footage is how the tail kind of has an action that's a little bit of uncontrollable. I say the uncontrollable as it doesn't do the same thing every time. Also with this worm, after watching the footage, it will lay flat pretty quick at times. Now as we watch this lake footage, I noticed that the tail still has a pretty good action to it. Now right there, as you notice, it does kind of lay flat pretty easy. And that's something I know at times I would never think about until I watch this footage, how these worms do just lay flat unless you just keep moving them constantly. Now as you see, one thing too I noticed is the red color is a lot easier for us to see than some of the darker colors, as we'll see with some of the upcoming worms. The next worm we're going to test is the 6-inch ridge worm in the Cali Magic red color. I've thrown this worm just a little bit in my time, and I do like how its tail is just a little bit different than the other worms that we're going to be looking and other worms that I've used. Now I've never seen this worm underwater, so let's go check out the footage and see how it is. Now as we watch this footage in the pool, I do notice right away that tail gives a lot of action. And it's a lot of bit different action than the worm that we just watched, which was the old monster. Now too, as we look, and this isn't just in the Cali Magic red color, which I know some companies call it the Cali 420, and then there's a couple other names for it. In the pool shot, you know, it just kind of looks like a dark green color. Now with this worm, just something I'll just share with y'all that I guess, you know, after I've thrown this worm compared to some of these other worms, this worm having that longer tail, it gives good action in the water, as you see, but it's a lighter worm. The body is smaller, so that means it weighs less. Now with that, I'm sharing that if you're going to throw this worm, you probably need to throw it on a lighter line. If you like to throw your worms offshore 16 pounds or more, this worm will not be thrown as far as some of the other worms that you might see here. I throw my worms offshore in a different variety of lines, so this here needs to be thrown probably in a 12 to 14 pound line just to make a far cast with it. Now that's just from my experience. Now as we look at the ridge worm in the lake footage, one thing I'll just note out pretty quick, as the green color is harder to see in the underwater footage than the red colors. So for future sake of the videos, we'll try to stick all the worms to one color, and it's just easier for us to see. Now I'm not a bass's eye, so I don't know exactly what they see, and we'll talk about that some other day. But with this worm, one thing I do like is the tail action. And not just the tail action, this worm doesn't lay as flat as fast as the Zumo Monster did. It's sat up more, probably because that tail is lighter and it's there floating in the water. Now let's get to the net bait, the C-Mac in the plum color. Now with the C-Mac, one thing I noticed was that the tail action was pretty good. I like the action of the tail, But the biggest thing I liked about this worm was it did not fall as flat on its side or on its whole body as quick as the Zumo monster did. It had a better stand-up ratio and stayed up longer than the Zumo monster, and that was just one thing I thought that was real intriguing about this worm. After watching this footage and the leg footage, I'm going to be throwing this worm a little bit more than I did before. Now, as we see this worm in the lake, it's pretty similar to what I saw in the pool. The tail does give a great action, but I'm more impressed by how this tail and this worm just floats longer than some of the other worms that we see. It didn't lay on its side or lay down as fast. It just stayed right there and floated up, which is just something that intrigues me about this worm. Now here we are with the Strike King Thumper in the plum color. Man, this is a big worm, and I was pretty curious to see how this looked underwater. I throw a lot of Strike King baits, and this is one that I actually do not throw as much. Let's go check it out. Now as you see this worm here in the pool, it is a pretty big worm compared to some of the other worms we've shown here. But with that, it gives great action with the tail. The Rage Tail series I know are a pretty good series that Strike King takes pride in. Now, I do like how this will float pretty good for as big as it is. Now, it will, as you see, go down pretty fast as we get to the lake footage and as you see in some of these pool shots. But with as long as it is, it just has more of a chance for it to give action. And I know all these worms are not just the same precise size. I tried to do this on purpose to give you different sizes, just to kind of get a feel of how they look. So here we are with the Thumper in the lake footage. As you can see, the tail still gives off great action. And it's interesting to me is that I could see the action of the worm further away than I did some of the previous worms in this footage. Now, one thing about this worm, it will lay flat on its side still, but maybe with it just being as big is why I can see it compared to some of the other worms. Strike King, once again, does a good job with their Rage Tail series, and I know those guys have done tests and they've seen this thing underwater, so those guys know what they're doing, being a bait company that's been around for a long time. Now the last worm we're going to test today is the V&M Wild Thang in the Texas Smoke color. This is a worm that I've thrown quite a bit lately and have caught some big fish with it. Now let's go check out how the underwater footage looks. Now after watching the footage, this tail gives some great action. Now it's pretty much the same action every time as you hop it as it's done here. It looks like it's a little bit of a circular action. Now one thing about this worm compared to the last worm and some of the previous, this worm is a little bit smaller. It's the 8.5 inch size worm. Now with this, as you see, you can see that circular action pretty good. It doesn't lay flat as fast as some of the other worms, but once again, I was really impressed with this action. But unlike some of the other worms, such as even the Zumo monster, you know what you're going to get with this worm, compared to some of the other ones at times might give a different action every time you hop it. Now as we look at the lake footage, remember, with it being a darker color, it's kind of harder for us to see than the red colors. But with that in mind, we can still clearly see the action of the tail of this worm. I like the action of this worm. I know it sits up on the rocks pretty good. It does not lay on its side and sink as fast as some of the other worms. Now, after seeing all the baits underwater, they're all worms, but each one of them has their own distinct feature to their action or how they sink or do not sink. Now, after watching this footage, I know I've learned a lot more about how these worms look underwater, the action, how they sink, and how they lay. Hopefully you have learned something too. If there's any other style of bait you would like us to test, please leave them in a comment down below. I know Johnny and I with Fish the Moment, we would like to go ahead and one day get this to be really big with the underwater footage. Right now we're going to be pretty basic with it, and as time goes we're going to get better with our shots and better with the production of this series. I know one goal of ours is even just to show y'all how these baits look like in brush piles. I know we're learning about this, learning how to use the cameras. Be patient with us. Check back for more content. Please hit like and subscribe. And like I said, let us know what type of footage y'all would like us to show and what style of baits y'all like us to see. Thank you for watching. Please check it back again next time.